Hello everybody, how's it going today? Glowplasma 231 here, back in data Weekly Shonen Jump, issue number 19 of 2025. And man, what an interesting issue of Jump do we have today. Of course, we have 15 whole series to talk about. Pretty much everything I read into Weekly Shonen Jump magazine is on, and as much as some of you may debate and say, hey, Ruri Dragon isn't technically part of the magazine. Yes, it's not in the physical magazine, but it's part of the digital magazine, so I count it nonetheless. So yes, it is posted on Jump Plus, but all of these series are also posted on Jump Plus, so it's like, there's not really any major difference to it at the end of the day, if you guys get what I'm saying. But like I said, we've got 15 series to talk about, and we have a lot of really good things happening this week. A lot of also just mediocre, and hey, it really feels like these series are sort of driving to their end. And then we have Astro Royale, where I actually smiled reading this chapter this week, but we will be getting to all of that in due time. And a few things to say before we get started on this video. Number one, I am very, very tired. I've been up for a very long time today, but my roommate is not currently here in my room up at college, which means that I pretty much can record as many videos as I want in a day and not having to work around all of his breaks wherever he's out of the room. So I pretty much been recording a bunch of videos all day and just been going at it, going out doing things and a bunch of everything else. So I am very tired. So like I said, we have 15 series to talk about, but there are going to be a good amount of these where I will just want to blaze through them because, I am just simply very, very tired. And the quicker I get to bed, the quicker and better everything else is going to be sort of around me, if you guys get what I'm saying. But really, if you guys don't know how this series works, it's very simple. Like I said, we're going to go through and talk about all 15 of these series in Weekly Shonen Jump, hopefully in under an hour and 45 minutes. An hour or 45 minutes, that's the goal. If I go over an hour and 45 minutes, then I'm going to be real, I don't know if this video is coming out, right? But we're going to be talking about all these various series, and then after we talk about them, we're going to be ranking them from what I thought was the best series of the week all the way down to what I thought the worst series of the week was, and of course, all of the other 13 slots in between. And we will also be picking my favorite character of the week. Is hey, who do I think had the very best showing in all of the Weekly Shonen Jump manga I read this week, right? But really, without any further ado, let's just go and get started with good old Akane-banashi, right? This is Akane-banashi chapter number 74, and of course, I do a other video series on Akane-banashi in specifics, hey, it's this sort of type of review, but just going through every single little detail of this chapter, really breaking it down and seeing what really happens in this Akane-banashi chapter. I'll have that video, I will have the playlist to it linked in the description down below, but also just go check out the channel of Glowplasma at Glowplasma on YouTube, and you'll find the chapter number 74 up there, right? Pretty much this chapter of Akane-banashi is just going through all of the various things that have happened after Samura learned about the death of Kunishige Rokuhira. We see that Yora comes to his house, pretty much says hey, how's it going? We're part of an organization called Hishaku. We plan to get the the Magatsumi away from the Sword Saint, and Yora pretty much says hey, I want to use the Magatsumi blade to execute the Sword Master, and I want to wield the Shinichi, and how I want to do this is I want to create my own true realm to pretty much counter the malediction and put an end to it on that small island. Really leading me to believe that he has something to do with the island of Shokoku altogether, but nothing's really confirmed at this point yet. We pretty much understand everything that Samura is thinking about this, and it's hey, this isn't good whatsoever. Hey, we should have eradicated all of these people from the root to look towards the future. We just should have executed the Sword Master to begin with. We see a little bit of what's happening with Iori at this time also, and hey, 3 years later after Kunishige died, or 3 years after Samura pretty much told Iori, hey, go live with your mother's sister, pretty much, go live with your aunt here in this moment, right? We see yes, Kunishige was killed, and Iori was pretty much put under a bunch of surveillance stuff because, hey, she is the daughter of one of the people that all the Hishaku guys are trying to kill, so it really does make sense. We eventually see the Masumi comes over and says, hey, we're going to put a seal on your memories your father asked us to. And we see that Iori gets this little note from Samura just saying, hey, I'm sorry I caused you nothing but pain. And Iori is crying as she's reading this note, but we then cut back to the present where we see all of this various stuff is going on. Of course, Chihiro just cut down Hirohiko using the EI White Purity style. We see that Todo comes in and pretty much saves Hirohiko and moves him off to another side. Chihiro and Iori end up teaming up after some various stuff. And the whole idea for the rest of this chapter is Iori just saying hey, the sky, is that Samura looking down on all of us, right? And Chihiro's hey, it is, but he can't come and see you now. Mr. Samura is on a mission, right? As Chihiro eventually, the two of them just like talk about all of this various stuff, right? And she says like, hey, no matter how much I struggled, my feelings could never reach him. And Chihiro's like, hey, none of that was ever meaningless. You can reach him now. As he reaches down and starts to draw the Inten enchanted blade, Azuri just says like, hey, I want to see my father. As we see, also, I didn't mention this, but like Hirohiko also got the blade from Todo. As he draws the Kumeyori, Chihiro draws Inten, and then the owl in the sky disappears. As Mr. Samura appears, drawing Tobimune and appearing in the sky with these massive crow wings sprouting out of his back. It is an amazing chapter of Kagurabachi, and just like the panel that we see here at the end of the day of like Samura just looming up in the air, it is just absolutely so cool. Like I said, if you guys want to hear my extended thoughts on this chapter, go check out my video on the channel. It's been up for a few days at this point. I definitely think it's a good one, but this chapter of Kagurabachi was just absolutely amazing. One Piece had also a very interesting chapter this week, and honestly, the reason I think it's so interesting is for the chapter title that we get. Of course, One Piece did have the magazine cover this week, of course, like Luffy in Gear 5 coming out of a television screen, all because, like, hey, One Piece, the Egghead arc is back in production, pretty much, so that was a big whole reveal thing and why One Piece got the magazine cover. But the chapter title of this One Piece chapter is Wildfire in Forest Sector 2, Branch Route 8. And we pretty much see this whole chapter is about putting out this fire in the branch route. Really, there's a lot of other stuff going on. We start off the chapter with Sanji and Zoro going through and, like, cutting down this massive, like, weird beast here in Elbaf. They go to cook it up, and we see that they went out to go get food because, of course, Loki needs some food to be able to be feeling better. There's a really funny joke in the beginning of this chapter where Luffy is just going through continually, like, force-feeding what is his name, Loki, all of this, like, very hot food, and, like, Gerd's even like, hey, he's got even more, burns on him than he had to begin with, and, like, we even see that she's sort of, like, into it, like, sort of punishing Loki in this very big way, but we pretty much understand it, like, yes, at a certain point, everybody learns, like, hey, the Royal Knights were, or not the Royal Knights, it's a Digimon term, the Holy Knights were here, and Loki pretty much explains all of that, and pretty much Luffy asks about red-haired Shanks, and eventually, Loki just says, like, hey, I understand whenever you admire somebody that much, and Luffy just says, like, oh, so does that mean that you admired somebody like I admired Shanks in the past? And Loki just says, like, yes, I did, and it pains me that I was only a boy at the time. As we see that, of course, Loki comes through here and tries to interact with one of these other pirates, so presumably, like, we see Loki's like, hey, take me with you, I didn't come here to meet, and the guy's like, hey, I didn't come here to meet a whelp like you, stop making me repeat myself, and Loki's like, hey, fight me then, as we see that this mysterious pirate comes through and cuts Loki down, and Loki just says, like, hey, I was born in the wrong era. I really don't know if we know who this is. Like, my best guess is maybe, like, Rocks or something like that. Like, one of these pirates who we've heard a lot about, but really don't know too much, all things considered, right? We then see, of course, Dory and Bragi fighting in the Great Eric, fighting off all of these various Draugr soldiers, right? Scopper Gaban does a few cool things, but that's really all there is. The rest of the chapter is really about this massive fire going on. We see that Saul ended up quelling Fenrir all on his own, but really he's trying to, like, tell, like, all of the, pretty much Elbaf firefighters, like, hey, put out the thing here. It looks like the children are getting ready to walk into it, right? And it's this really big deal where, like, nobody can put it out whatsoever. But that is until Jinbei appears to come through and uses one of his Fishman Karate shoulder throw moves and throws a bunch of water, putting out the fire in this moment, right? Everybody is so very happy, but this area of, like, very happiness doesn't last for long, as we see that the Holy Knight Gunko appears on Colin's pirate ship with all of the various Straw Hats who are here. Of course, what is it? It's Brook, Usopp, Chopper, Nami, and Jinbei, and we see that Gunko has come here in this moment and just like, hey, so I suppose this isn't the only place to find a perky child. And yeah, Gunko's appeared. Of course, I really like Gunko's design, so it's cool to see her really do some stuff, but really, this was a fine One Piece chapter. Wasn't my favorite one we've ever gotten, but also, like, I didn't hate this chapter at all, right? Ichi the Witch was a extremely fun chapter this week, really focusing on, like, hey, what is the plan going on here, and how is Ichi going to go through and acquire the Bakugami magic, right? As we start off this chapter with a really funny moment of all of the various people of the Bakugami Kingdom pretty much like giving Desscaras a really big deal and just saying like, hey, Lady Witch, here's an overview of our security measures and all of this stuff. Like, hey, whatever you can do to help us find these two wanted criminals, like, hey, let's capture those traitors and we'll arrest them and drag them to the executioner's block, right? And Desscaras is like, oh yeah, about that, right? Kumagi and Desscaras are just freaking out about literally all of this various stuff, right? And pretty much he's like, hey, we've got to find those two morons before the devotees do, without letting on that we're actually connected to them, right? And of course, as I mentioned, Desscaras is sitting here at some, like, very big tablecloth table, pretty much, eating all this various food, and Ichi comes out from beneath the table and just is like, hey, Desscaras, right? And Desscaras just freaks out, just going like, oh, right? Pretty much like doing this in this moment, completely freaking out. And all the devotees are just like, oh, Lady Witch, is something the matter? And Desscaras pretty much just says like, no, I'm just terribly sorry, but would you mind give us two ladies some privacy? And the devotees are like, what are you talking about? And Desscaras is like, hey, we like to conduct our ultra amazing witch ritual to think of a plan, right? And the devotees are like, oh, really? Well, hey, if you can think of a perfect plan, we'll give you a little bit of time here. It's a little bit of a funny joke, right? But once all of them leave, Desscaras is like, hey, what are you doing, Ichi? Like, what are you doing? She even calls him, like, a brainless smut, right? As Ichi just says, like, hey, help us acquire Bakugami, Desscaras and Kumagi, right? And you're like, what do you mean, right? We see that Gokuraku and Ichi are pretty much just sitting on the ground explaining all of this various stuff. And Desscaras just thinks, like, hey, here's the thing. For one, we don't know how much we can really trust this guy here. I mean, about all these things like acquiring Bakugami, right? And Desscaras just says like, hey, and two, him wandering around punching random magic sent a lot of those magics, making all of the witches' jobs harder, right? More than one association of which had their acquisition derailed because of him. I'm not going to believe anything he says without good reason, right? And Gokuraku just is like, hey, once Bakugami is acquired, I'll accept my punishment. Arrest me, destroy my bracers and my greaves, whatever. I'm happy as long as someone does something about that magic. And Desscaras eventually just looks over and says like, hey, Ichi, what makes you think that he is trustworthy? And Ichi's just like, oh, it's my feral instinct. But besides all of that, he is my friend, and I want to believe my friend. And we see that Desscaras gives a little bit of a smile to Ichi in the moment, before really just going through and scolding him all things considered. But eventually she just says like, hey, here's the thing. According to all the security plans, the main area where Bakugami is kept is very heavily under guard, right? Ichi's like, hey, well, that's really annoying. And Desscaras is like, hey, and whose fault is that? But she's like, hey, so what do we do here? It's what I call the all bark, no bite plan. And everybody's a little freaked out at this, but it makes sense here in a second. As we see that Desscaras is going outside of the tent finally and just says like, hey, devotees, like, hey, we've got all of our plan figured out, right? And we see that Desscaras has a little bit of a official request for inspection from the Maintenance Witches Association, right? And the main devotee just says like, hey, I'm terribly sorry, but like, we can't let you go look at Bakugami. I mean, it's our literal country's national treasure. We can't really let you do that. Of course, this was explained a little bit before, right? As Desscaras just says like, hey, is that so? Well then, I suppose there's nothing else for it, right? As all of a sudden, Ichi appears in the background on top of one of these various shrine buildings pretty much and just says like, hey, Bakugami sucks, and yells it into a megaphone all over the city of Bakugami. And everybody's just freaking out as Ichi just says like, hey, a waste of space, it just sleeps all day, it's terrible, it stinks, and just a big pile of doo-doo. Fake liar god. And all the devotees are getting up in arms. They see Gokuraku is behind him. As Ichi and Gokuraku hop on Urowashi that Ichi summons here in the moment, as Ichi starts to fly towards the various, the shrine where Bakugami is currently being held, right? And eventually, Desscaras is like, hey, that's right, I'll go guard Lord Bakugami in this moment, right? And the devotee's like, hey, but Lady Witch, as Desscaras just says like, oh, what? Do y'all think you are better than me? As we see that she pretty much gets in her like, hey, I'm about to do something pose, right? And all the people are like, hey, okay, never mind. They're like, hey, but still, I can't let you go in there alone. I also have to be there to protect Lord Bakugami. We see that Desscaras eventually, like, just hits this guy in the back of the head, saying, like, hey, whatever about all of that, right? As we see that she walks in, just says, like, all right, no beating around the bush. As she summons one of her magics, Golcolada, and she says like, hey, are you ready, Magic? Because Desscaras, the ultra elite interrogator, is here. And it's about time to blow the lid off of this joint. And that's where we end this chapter of Ichi the Witch. And what can I say? This was just a fascinating chapter, all things considered, right? Ruri Dragon was another really fun chapter, really all about Ruri coming to terms more of like, hey, the entire school festival's over, so what am I doing after this, right? We see the beginning of this chapter is her sitting and talking with her teacher. I forget what his name is. It's something like Takanashi-san, but it's not something, it's not that exactly, but it's something, I think that starts with T, right? Pretty much, she and, this guy, the teacher, are talking, and pretty much he just says, like, hey, so what do you want to do after this? Do you want to go live and be on your own with all of your dragon kind, or do you want to continue to live at school? And he's like, hey, I sort of want you to live at school for the whole fact of, like, I still want a job to do, pretty much. As Ruri's Ventures just says, like, hey, yes, that's fine. I'll come and live at the school, or I won't live at school, but I'll continue to come to school. But hey, on one condition, I want you to make sure I can't hurt any of my classmates, right? So a little bit of a nice moment there. We usually see that Ruri's talking to all of her friends, pretty much saying like, hey, am I just like really that antisocial? But the whole point here at the end of the day is that she ends up adding Mideta online, which is like, hey, Ruri is slowly making all of these various friends until we start moving towards the very end of the chapter where Ruri pretty much explains like, hey, she's concealing all of her Daemon Fire in her right eye, if I'm not mistaken. She's concealing it in one of her eyes pretty much. And eventually the whole thing is like, hey, another one of Ruri's draconic traits starts to bloom, and it seems to be an ice power. But the really cool thing is in the final panel of this chapter, we see that Ruri's eyes have sort of gone into star shapes instead of the regular dragon-like eyes. So it's a little bit of a cool thing to see. Is like she's completely freezing, and all of her classmates are like, hey, Ruri, is this you again, right? As we get a little bit of narration just saying like, hey, so began a stormy period of my dragification, right? Good chapter of Ruri Dragon, just not a really whole lot to say about it, right? And it's really going to be the same with Kill Blue this week. It's like, hey, Ogami's going through and fighting with Chitatsu about, like, hey, becoming the next president of the Home Ec Club, right? The whole next competition is that of a laundry folding competition. Ogami gets completely smoked, and of course, he's lost. I mean, he lost 2 out of 3 of the competition, so he has no rank or he's got no sort of, he can't become the club president at this point. Like I said, I'm tired. My brain is not forming words like it wants to, right? Either way, we see that Chitatsu eventually just says, like, hey, why do you want to become this so bad? It gets explained that Norin's like, hey, he wanted to do this for my sake, to be able to take over the pharmaceutical company and then destroy it pretty much. And eventually, Chitatsu's like, hey, in that case, we'll have one final competition. With 500 yen, you have to go out and create the best little bowl of rice you can, right? And of course, we see that Chitatsu goes, gets some fancy materials, makes this really good soup pretty much, and everybody's like, oh man, it tastes so good. But then Ogami goes, and we see that he comes back with a giant boar on his back. So he pretty much explains, like, hey, I pretty much used my 500 yen to go up to the mountains. I paid bus fare, and I brought this boar back down with me. And hey, I'm going to whip up some of my famous, what does he call it in the chapter, if I could navigate back to it here real quick. He calls it like, hey, it's finally ready. Chef Ogami's special boar bone broth ramen, right? Or boar bone ramen. I don't know why I said broth in there, but it honestly makes it sound a bit more cooler, right? And Chitatsu's like, okay, I may be shaking in my boots. Juzo Ogami, you are really one of a kind. And that's where we end off this chapter of Kill Blue. It was fine, but it also, like I said, it wasn't my favorite chapter of manga we've gotten here recently. Sidcraft is another, like, hey, we've introduced a new girl into this series, and I honestly thought this chapter was really funny because, like, the whole beginning part of it is just like, hey, Elio and Sidcraft are sort of like doing their own things and like just getting their introductions like they get every single chapter, right? And Elio's like, hey, you look very tired, Master Sid. And Sid brings up like, hey, well, I still haven't gained any info about Zerocraft, and I don't have enough arms and legs to really deal with all of these various cases right now, right? And doing all this various paperwork, right? As eventually we see that Elio comes over, brings some tea over, and he's like, hey, thank you very much, Elio. As all of a sudden, the ground starts to shake beneath them, and Elio's like, oh, what is that loud noise coming from downstairs? Like, is it some kind of attack? Could it be Zerocraft? As we see this, it's like, oh no, this is probably, oh wait, I haven't told you about this yet, have I, Elio? the inventor who lives downstairs, Dr. Hakura, right? As the rest of this chapter is really getting introduced to the next girl in the series, and honestly, I want to have a little bit of talk about this. Of course, we know who all the girls are in Sidcraft. Of course, we have Elio, we have Sofue, we have Lulu, and we have the new girl here of Hakura. But is Mad Hill Misery also considered? Because I don't really consider her at this point. She sort of like shows up, really hasn't had any romantic interactions with Sid. So I'm like, is she part of the general harem that we're building up here? I'm not really so sure. But we see the whole idea here is like, yes, Dr. Hakura is a very famous inventor, or not really a famous inventor, but a famous inventor to the people who know them, right? We just pretty much like get introduced like, hey, this is the inventor, the landlady's daughter, Hakura, or Hakua Metallica, right? Which is like, okay, really, Metallica, that's not the best last name, all things considered, right? But we see that she's a very busty young woman who doesn't wear a lot of clothes, all things considered, right? And we see the relationship that her and Sid have is one of like, hey, she always calls her like, hey, big bro, right? And we see that Elio is very like freaked out. It's honestly very funny to see Elio be like the straight man pretty much this entire chapter, or straight woman, I guess you could say, right? There's a little bit of a weird thing sort of like pointing out like, hey, Hakura 5 years ago looked very, very small, and we don't really know how old she was, but hey, here in 5 years, she's grown up to be like really big, and like, I don't know about all this, like very curvy, right? Really, what I want to believe is like here in the images, like Susui was just drawing her like, oh yes, this girl is 13 years old. And look at this. Now she is legally 18, past the limit. So all of you people who are being weird at home, you can be weird at home, right? But all things considered, we see that they just have some interactions, and that Sid is very much turned off by all of her big breasts just constantly pressing up against him. Eventually, some of Hakua's inventions sort of like going off, right? And we see that these inventions are named in a very specific way. We see that they are called the Kafura, which means for Haruka, and the Freuds, which means for Sid, right? Pretty much like, hey, this entire time Hakua has really been just coming through and like creating all these inventions that help Sid out here in the moments, right? Sid's very like, hey, thank you for all this various stuff, right? And eventually we see that there's like a little bit of a joke at the end of the chapter where one of these inventions ends up helping out Sid with all of his paperwork. A fine enough chapter. We got introduced to the next girl of the series, but also it's like, hey, it was just fine. Like I said, it was a fine introduction chapter, but also like just not a whole lot to it at the end of the day, right? Embers is up next, and what can I say? Really, everything that I've been predicting for the last few chapters really came to a head in this chapter, as we see, like, yes, Haitani is playing at soccer with all of his other teammates, but everything that he studied is really just going and completely backfiring on him, right? As we see that the main guy, whose names we learned last time, I think his name was Yuzin Nerima, we see that him and the other person from their soccer teams pretty much talking to each other, right? And the guy's just like, hey, I came out here thinking that we'd get a pretty good match for the first round, but this isn't what I expected. Going into this, I honestly thought Kosei would be a little bit better, but hey, I guess not, right? As we see, the current score is like, hey, Iba Seiryu is at 1 point, and Kosei affiliated is at 0 points, right? And we see that all the various team members are just like yelling at Haitani, like, hey, what the heck, dude? Like, the hell are you doing all the way up here? Like, Haitani, get back to the back lines, right? Haitani's like, hey, I'm sorry, I thought it was supposed to be like the team's offensive core, right? As pretty much we cut over into the stands where we see Hakura. I think her name is Haruka. Yeah, I'm pretty sure her name's Haruka. And Yukizuki pretty much sitting with each other, and Haruka's like, hey, look at that, Haitani's participating in all of the offense, like all of his study paid off, right? And Yukizuki's just like, hey, you idiot, that's exactly why we're in massive trouble here, right? And Haruka's like, what do you mean, right? As it pretty much gets explained like, hey, what is going on here is just a lack of Haitani not really knowing what he is supposed to do, right? As we pretty much see that one of the people from the Yuzin Nerima's teammate just says like, hey, Iba Seiryu's offense is about as simple as it gets. Steal the ball and then long pass it all the way back to their forwards, right? And that's really the end of it, right? But that's all they need. As we see that Yukizuki's like, yeah, it's way too effective. Because waiting all the way back there is that freaking giant of a forward. No one beats him in any aerial duties, right? As we see that Bugai is going and currently like fighting with the big guy. I forgot his name from last chapter. Maybe I'll learn it for next one, right? But the whole idea here is that Haitani's also getting up close to the ball. And Bugai's just like, damn it, like what are you doing all the way around here, right? as we see that Narima's teammate just says like, hey, Ibisaryu has both their offense and defense neatly organized around Kaneda. His name is Kaneda, right? But Kosei, their defense is a Steve, and they can't beat Kaneda like a duel to save their lives. Bugai, their center, is stuck to having to run to everybody's rescue, which leaves their midfield completely empty. There's nothing they can do, right? As Yukizuki just thinks like, hey, a head-level anchor like Bugai is a major asset. They're a bridge that connects both halves of the field. But that bridge falls apart. The team then gets split in two. As we pretty much see like, hey, because Bugai is stuck dealing with Kaneda this entire time, really the team is not working as well as it should be, right? But we then see that Narima is sitting down here and just is like, oh, the big blonde one. He's wrecking the balance of his entire team. It's almost as if he doesn't know if he's offense or defense. And the teammate's just like, were you watching Narima, right? And it's like, And Narima's like, I was watching a little bit. Why he's voluntarily running around so much, I really don't get it, right? As we pretty much see what's going through Haitani's mind, he's just like, damn it, I don't know what I'm doing here, right? He's like, what am I even doing? I thought I was going to learn how to do more. I thought I was going to be the best here and now. And then maybe at some point, as we see as he's running through the entire area, one of his teammates comes by. It's the guy who we saw very prominently featured in the A-Rank, the bald guy pretty much, or the buzzcut guy, comes through and like slaps Haitani on the side and just is like, hey dude, what the hell are you doing, Haitani? I said I already got this ball. And Haitani's like, oh my gosh, I am just like so sorry, right? As Yukizuki in the stand just says like, hey, Haitani does not have the brain power to do two things at once. So he's thinking so hard, his one brain cell popped, right? As Haruka's like, oh no, this is my fault. I gave him way too much information, right? As we pretty much see that Haitani just thinks like, what am I doing, right? As Bugai comes over to Haitani and just is like, hey, Haitani, come over here, right? Haitani, calm down. You have got this. If you're having trouble making a decision, look at me. I will signal you, right? And Haitani's like, wait, so are you saying like you're not mad about all of this, right? And he's like, I thought for sure you'd be so pissed, right? And we see that Bugai's like, hey, why would I be? Yes, you are just clearly going in circles, but you're giving it your all, and I'm not going to berate you for that. Just calm down and do what you always do. That is plenty, right? And Haitani just says like, hey, but aren't I the core of the offense? Like, even though I can't dribble or shoot or any of that stuff, you will say, as I always do, but with bad luck, how am I any help here, right? As Haitani just says like, hey, though I guess it's what happens when I try to think way too hard, right? And Bugai's like, oh, did you hear Yukizuki and I talking? Well, you have a point. Shooting, dribbling, passing, trapping, you're utterly abysmal about just about everything. But I want you to keep this in mind, too. To do any of those things, you first need to have the ball. And everyone on this field, who is the best at stealing the ball from an opponent? Haitani, it's you. Our offense starts with you. With that firmly in mind, I'll say it one more time. Go do what you always do. As he points over towards the big guy of Kaneda, as Haitani just walks up, right? Kaneda's like, hey, what are you doing over here, little scrawny guy, right? What's a deadweight gonna do around me, God and me, right? As Haitani just says like, hey, if you don't know, let me tell you. Stuff I can do. Number one, steal the ball from you, right? And Kaneda's like, oh, steal it from me? All right then, right? But Haitani's like, hey, and at least for now, there isn't any other number two. As he just says like, hey, it's time to fire all of this up. And what can I say? I really like this chapter of Embers going all the way through, just seeing how eventually Haitani comes through and like, hey, it was a big detriment to him, but now Haitani's looking like he's going to be a better character at the end of the day, right? Star of Beethoven is up next, and this is a fine enough chapter. The beginning of this chapter is really just set in place for us to understand the character of Okogu, right? Pretty much we see that Beethoven sees this like television program that's going on here, just as like, oh man, I want to be on this television program, right? It's not very important. Ichiro starts off his first day at Rirero Academy, runs into Kahoen. Pretty much Kahoen shows him entirely around, and we see that who's his face, Yasuo ends up starting to interact with Aigo, right? Pretty much we see that Aigo really doesn't like him, all things considered, and eventually it is revealed why at the end of the chapter, right? As she pretty much just says like, hey, Mr. Yasuo, I expect will understand why I don't like him whenever I explain it to him. The puny name I love, Agu, is my real name, but it's not the name I was born with. Ago was bestowed upon me whenever my mother remarried. My original last name was Mikagahara, right? And all of a sudden, we see that Ichiro's like, what? Mikagahara? Like, what could that mean, right? As eventually Yasuo remembers, like, oh, don't tell me. You were my master. And we pretty much see that Ikogu's just like, hey, yes, master indeed. The therapy that you all call him, but yes, you are correct. That elderly man who was supposed to be resting due to a severe illness insisted on keeping his shop open in order to play piano with some boy, who then quickly abandoned everything he'd been taught and quit playing the piano entirely. That humble old coffee shop owner you were so quick to betray was my grandfather, right? And like, hey, I sort of do like this reveal. I'm not really a big fan of Ikogu's character yet, but I'm sure it'll grow on me as time goes on, right? We eventually see where Lexi and, I forget what her name was, the other two characters who were pretty much involved the whole bigger necromancy. Marcia was her name, if I'm not mistaken, right? The whole big necromancy plotline pretty much are going on a plane flying over to Japan. And Lexi's like, hey, what exactly do you think this guy is doing over here, right? As Marcia's like, hey, good question. It's reasonable to assume that he's with whoever possesses the Ring of Resurrection. But Beethoven has a reputation for being wild and reckless. Would he really meekly obey whoever that could just be? Pretty much explain like, hey, Beethoven's a very erratic guy, and the whole idea is like, hey, the question is, if Beethoven is contently living in modern-day Japan, what exactly does he intend to do with all of his free time? As we see that Beethoven is sitting in Ichiro Yasuo's house, and we see that he is written on a piece of paper, Piano Sonata number 33. Now, I don't know Beethoven, and I am so tired I did not feel like researching what this meant, but I'm guessing that this is supposed to be like, hey, he's writing a new piano piece, and that probably Ichiro is going to be playing it, and he's going to win over the affection of Aigo this way. It just seems like natural storytelling that we get in these kind of manga, right? Star of Beethoven was okay. It wasn't the best chapter I've ever read, but it also just wasn't terrible either, right? If I could actually type things in, Star of Beethoven, right? Astro Royale was up next, and hey, the whole thing here is like, hey, everybody's trying to fight against Tendo, right? As we see that Baro's like, oh, Tendo, what are you doing here? As we see that Tendo is using the Daybreak Ore and pretty much sucking out the life force out of all of the various people here, of course, relating back to his power of like, he's like, hey, my power pretty much grants the wielder all of the energy that feeds off of energy, greed, passion, hatred. It devours all of the energy contained in all of these places, right? Hibaru's starting to get his energy sucked out of him. He can't move. Whoa, Tiara comes into way and swings his sword and blocks off Tendo's strike, right? Oh no, it's also going towards Shikaba. Oh, look at that. Tarasu comes in and uses his shield here in the moment, right? It's like, hey, everybody's coming together. As Tendo's like, Tarasu, you're still here. As Tarasu pretty much explains like, hey, you're the one who is all set up. All this Shikaba did to rebel against you was called Hibaru here. And like, hey, he said that he figured Hibaru was the only one who could break him out of the mess that he is in right now, right? As Tenma starts to sprout these really weird rings and turns into like, or wings if I could speak, and turns into these really funny looking Chimera Daybreak Ore monsters. Honestly, they look so very cool every time we get one of these. So of course, Himuro got one of those whenever he did his very big thing, right? As pretty much Tendo's like, hey, what difference could calling one little brat here make? But then there's a helicopter in the sky. And we see that Rari Yotsurugi is here, right? That's pretty cool. But all of a sudden, look, there's a guy with multiple arms coming down and punching into this guy. Whoa, it's Ko Yotsurugi. Oh, look at that. There's a bird coming in. And oh, it's Karan Yotsurugi. And hey, look at that, a healer's here. It's Genji Obana, of course, the Yotsurugi family advisor, who uses his leech heal ability to pretty much get everybody back up to full health, right? And oh, what about that? Somebody uses a blazing compact beam. Who could that be but Kimpa Yobana? Kimpa's here, right? But oh no, a massive fist is coming in using a Herculean force. It's Tarazo! As pretty much we get a final page, or a double page spread of like, hey, Yotsurugi family, Hibaru faction, assembled and ready. As we pretty much see all of the important characters are here in the moment. really, when I think of the main core cast of this series, I think of like, okay, we have Hibaru, we have Tarasu, we have Karan, and we have Kimpa. If just those four were here, I'd be happy, but I also got a little bit of a nice smile to me, seeing like, oh hey, Tarazo's here, oh hey, Tiara and Shikaba are also now joining up. Granted, it's sort of a little bit of a weird thing. I understand why Tiara is joining up, but like, Shikaba is just now here to fight against Tendo. Also, Reiri's here, and also Genji. I also do like Genji just being here, being like, he was a very big part of the series to begin with, so, I don't know. It was honestly a decently good chapter of Astro Royale, and for once, it may not be ranking completely on the bottom. I actually did enjoy this chapter of Astro Royale, right? Hima-ten is up next, and really this whole chapter, just to fly through it really quickly, because honestly, I just wasn't the biggest fan of this chapter. I just really don't know why. I sort of just read it and like, didn't really get too much out of it. Like, really one of the first times this happened with Hima-ten was during the whole festival, or not the festival, but during whenever they were going stargazing. I just really wasn't into that arc, because like, it took away from all of the main housekeeping stuff and all of the things that this series is really about. But really, this chapter's like, hey, the fireworks festival is happening. Hibari ended up not being able to make it, right? And also, Kana wasn't able to make it either, right? So we see that Kanai is going through with Iamori, Yokumizu, and also the other girl, Mayu, is there. Pretty much they are forcing both Iamori and Kanai together to do all these various things. It's a lot of various rom-com stuff, and later they're all sitting down to watch the fireworks festival happen, and Iamori brings out his phone to pretty much record what's going on, right? And Kanai's like, hey, why are you doing that? And Iamori just is like, hey, well, I just wanted to save it for Himari, pretty much, right? And the whole rest of this chapter is really just Iamori thinking about what he thinks about Kanai in the moment, right? As eventually he comes to Yoshino's house later and just gives her a call to saying like, hey, are you home right now, right? And she's like, yeah, what's up? And he just says like, hey, hypothetically, if I said I wanted to show you a video of the fireworks, and for example, I was heading back to your place right now, even though it's not a cleaning day, and I asked if I could come in, what would you say, Yoshino? And we just see that she's like, well, I guess I'd say that I wouldn't mind. And really, that's this chapter of Hima-ten. It wasn't my favorite chapter of Hima-ten out there, because it really seems like this series is wrapping itself up. Of course, at the time I'm recording this video, we do have an announcement that in issue number 21 and 22-23, we're going to be getting 2 new series in Shonen Jump. So it really seems like we're going to be wrapping up some of these series soon. I could see if Astro Royale is wrapping up, but I don't think it is, because of course we still have the whole Shio thing to deal with, unless it's like, hey, we're going to beat the big bat, or we're going to beat what is his name, Tenma? Yeah, Tendo here in the next 2 chapters. And then after we beat Tendo, it's going to be, hey, we're going to beat Shio and all the adventures we had along the way, and that's sort of where we can this series there. But it really seems like Hima-ten may be able to wrap up here in the next few chapters, which honestly, I wouldn't be the biggest fan of, because I really want to see more of this series, but it does seem like that's where it's currently heading, right? Next up is Ultimate Exodus Kyoshi, and this chapter is all about meeting the first Demon Lord, Tonjinchi, right? As we also get a really cool color page for Ultimate Exodus Kyoshi this week. I love to see the Ultimate Exodus Kyoshi color page. It's like, hey, we see what's going on here, and we see that, it's just Kyoshi looking cool. Simple as that. But Kyoshi doesn't appear in this chapter, so it sort of is what it is, right? Really, we see who ended up going through and stabbing Baku Yuraku through a few chapters ago. And Akari and all these other characters are like freaking out about like who it is. And we see that it is the first Demon Lord, Tonjichi. We eventually see as all this stuff is going on, like Yoko Oda's like, hey, Gates of Hell girl, go back and do all of your stuff. We see that Winchester Motaki comes through and uses an Iron Finger exorcism, 1 shot, 1 kill. And then Karuta, who's of course Akari's brother, comes through and uses all of his lightning powers to go and end up fighting Tonjichi, right? Really, it's a lot of back and forth action. We see that both Winchester Motaki and Karuta end up using pretty much their ultimate abilities here, as we see like, hey, I forget what his name all of a sudden. Yeah, Karuta ends up using his Rolling Thunder Raiden technique, and Winchester ends up using Hole-in-One Ultimate Weapon Manchester, right? But they're not able to beat Tonjichi at all. We eventually see like, oh no, this is really bad. Yoko Ono also gets hurt, along with the other girl her name's in this chapter somewhere. I just completely forgot what it was. Mako is her name. We see that she's got a prosthetic limb, it gets cut off, and it seems like her other leg is getting ready to be cut off in this moment. We see that Karuta end up being stabbed through by Tonjichi's power, but of course, who would come in to try to save the day but Nihon and Jack Joe and their combined power, right? But they're not strong enough. They're just getting beat by this Demon Lord Tonjichi, right? Until none other than Tsurugi comes in to save the day, as pretty much he's like, hey, I'm sorry I'm late, but you did good, right? As Crew's like, hey, you took long enough, Tsurugi, right? But he's like, hey, from here on out, this is a job for a cross paladin. Good chapter of Ome X Kyoshi. I like seeing Tsurugi come in at the end of the day, and it seems like he may be the one to dispose of the first ranking Demon Lord, while it seems like Sasaki's going to be dealing with another one, and of course the combined powers of Kyoshi and Sosuke are going to be dealing with another one of the ones, right? But really the one thing I did not like about this chapter is like, hey, you're really just taking away all the agency from Akari. She's not being able to do anything. It's like, it really seems like, hey, just another Jump heroine that can't do anything at all, which I just don't like. I want to see my Jump heroines do some really awesome stuff. But either way, I still did like Ultimate X Kyoshi at the end of the day, right? So Ultimate X Kyoshi. Akane-banashi, hey, we see the end of Shoumei's performances. Like, we get some really cool narration at the beginning of this chapter. We also get a really nice color page. What can I say, right? Honestly, this color page is like really just the old art style Japanese aesthetic. It looks really cool with Shoumei and like a hawk on it, right? But narration just says like, hey, dialogue time, and even crowd reaction. Everything in accordance with Master's principles. This is the power of the Okanban craftsman, Shoumei Tsubayakaya, right? Hey, it's pretty cool. Like, really just building up Shoumei here in a moment. We see that Akane comes over just as like, hey, Shoumei, can we talk about all of this stuff, right? And he's like, no. I have a 3-minute cooldown after performance, another one of my principles, right? We see he does this, Akane comes to come talk with him, right? And Akane pretty much just says like, hey, I understand why you don't want to train me. It's because the Rakugo world would suffer. Improv and by the book, our styles are polar opposites, right? So it'd be neutralizing the unique flavor of each approach, right? And Shoumei's like, hey, very astute, you pretty much have hit it right on the head, right? And Shoumei just says like, hey, you seem to have some skill with improvisation, but my art comes from surrendering your freedom. It's not suitable for you. We would just be both wasting our time, right? And guy's like, hey, if I could convince you I'd be a great craftsman, will you teach me to perform God of Death, right? And like, hey, that's no problem, right? If I'm not suited for it. And Shoumei just says like, hey, you might lose the freedom that is your greatest strength, but it kind of says like, hey, being trapped in one owned style isn't exactly free either. And we see Shoumei's like, okay, so you enjoy wordplay then. It sounds like you really want to learn my specialty. No. Master Shiguma's specialty, the previous Shoumei's God of Death. He's like, hey, very well. I will grant your request. However, I will not spare your feelings. I do not waste time on pointless ventures. That is one of my principles, right? We cut time a little later as we see that Akane is hanging around the Rakugo place, pretty much. I forget whatever it's called, or the Rakugo Federation. And we see that Tyson's here, and he pretty much explains like, hey, you don't need to be lazing around here. Shoumei is not going to come back for at least for another good long while. And like, hey, all of this are various stuff, right? Eventually, he pretty much is like, hey, he's a very busy Okanban between shows and judging. And it kind of like, oh, what is he judging? As we see, there's a new Rakugo competition going on called the Zurin Prize. And Bernate is a brand new competition for Futatsume unveiled this year, right? And Akane's like, oh, this is a good opportunity. She signs up for it just in a really quick moment. She just says like, hey, it's now time for me to run it. As we then cut into the Zunin Prize office, where we see that, I forget what his name is. It's the main Rakugo guy, the newspaper guy that we've seen so much throughout this series. This is like, oh, hey, it looks like you've got quite a few good entries so far for the Zunin Prize, right? And the guy's just like, oh, well, I had my concerns. This is a brand new Rakugo event after all, but Master Shoumei's really pulled through, brought in all of these excellent candidates, right? And we pretty much just see, I think his name is Kasho maybe, just as like, hey, I'm really sure that you also played your part, right? But the guy just says like, hey, and not only do we have so many entries, but as he hands over a paper to the newspaper guy, he just says like, oh yeah, indeed, You couldn't have asked for a bigger star than this one. As we see that it is none other than Hikaru, right? As we see that she's going around and working with, of course, all of her acting gigs and just says like, hey, I need to focus a bunch of time on Rakugo training. Guys like, no, but you can't pause all of your work. But she just says like, hey, it doesn't matter. If you're part of my frankness, I see hardly the merit in entering, or no, her pretty much attendant says like, hey, part of my frankness, I hardly see the merit in entering a contest that's just been created this year, right? As we see Hikaru just is like, hey, Akane Arakawa is entering. What better reason for me to not throw my hat into the ring? Hey, Hikaru's here. Pretty cool moment. I like this chapter of Akane-banashi for sure. Sorry if I'm really speaking through all these chapters, but according to OBS, I've been recording for 45 minutes, and I really want to wrap this video up here. But going into Blue Box, we pretty much just understand, like, hey, of course, the Yusa brothers are training with Hyodo and all of them, and the whole idea is, like, hey, the younger Yusa brother, Haruto, really wants to beat Taiki and make it to Nationals, right? And Hyodo just is like, hey, I'll give you some hints on how to take down Taiki Inomata, right? Hey, Chinatsu is going through and playing all of her various basketball games, doing all of her stuff very, very well, right? And we see up in the stands that Haru is having a little bit of a conversation with Taiki and just says like, hey, Chinatsu Kano has already shown us what her coolest looks like. And next time, it's your turn, Taiki, right? As Taiki just thinks like, whoa, yeah, it should really be good, right? As we just cut down to the court where we see that Chinatsu is playing and she just thinks like, hey, all of those things just came naturally to me. Both playing basketball and going to morning practice every day. That will all end with this tournament. Hey, nice work, me. As we see that she goes through and scores a basket goal here in a moment, right? And she says like, hey, I'll give myself a pat on the back and tell myself, hey, you did well. As we see that MLA High ends up winning, the final score is 63-60. Hey, good job. They went through and pulled it through, right? And she just thinks like, hey, thanks for all of the hard work, right? As we get a little bit of narration just saying like, hey, the next day on December 27th, during the quarterfinals of the Girls Winter Cup, Emily High School lost 54-69, and Chinatsu Senpai's high school basketball career came to an end. And we see that Taiki wakes up the next morning and, of course, has a lot of really conflicting thoughts going on about really all of this. As we see that he gets ready, goes over, and heads to school, as he just thinks like, hey, I don't have time to be feeling this lonely. Not until a day comes when my own high school athletic career ends. As he walks into the gymnasium, and Chinatsu Senpai is just simply in here shooting baskets. He's like, hey, what are you doing here, right? And she just says like, hey, it's a force of habit. Besides, I noticed some things about yesterday's game that bothered me. So this is sort of like a cool down for me, right? And she says like, hey, also, I felt like I had to say to you here, Taiki Inomata, you have to go to Nationals. And like, hey, it seems like Chinatsu's basketball story may be over, but hey, Taiki still has a badminton career ahead of him. Really good chapter of Blue Box this week, right? The Elusive Samurai is honestly a very complex chapter, all things considered. We start off with the whole idea of like, hey, Fubuki has actually pretty much passed to dust. And it's honestly a really nice moment where we see all of the elusive warriors just come through and reminisce on all of their various thoughts of Fubuki here, right? Actually, recently, after reading last chapter, I was like, you know what? I really want to go through and watch the Elusive Samurai anime and re-experience the beginning of this series that I really enjoyed so much. So going through it and seeing the introduction arc of Fubuki and really seeing how all of it worked together, I just have to say, it's honestly such an interesting story of how Fubuki ended up going and eventually coming to an end at the end of the day. And even somebody in the Viz manga comments, I saw they posted a little thing saying like, hey, the note that Matsui Sensei ended up having last week, his author comment pretty much said like, hey, he had this whole idea from the beginning to have Tokiyuki's attack of the demon side of the the Demon Heart Buddha Blade end up taking Fubuki out in the end. So even from whenever Fubuki was initially introduced, Matsui always knew that it was going to end this way, which was really just so interesting, right? We see Kojiro, Shizuku, Gimba, and Ayako really all just reminiscing on this moment. Sheena and not to also sort of have some things like, hey, we weren't around Fubuki for as long as the rest of you were, but even still, it's pretty sad to see him gone just like that, right? Then the whole idea is like, hey, we've got to take Fubuki's head to pretty much come through at the end of the day and show everybody like, hey, we're strong, we can be feared, and all of this, our various stuff, right? And we also then see that, hey, Mochiyuse Sensei, who comes through, and of course, who is Ayako's father, comes through and just says like, hey, are you taking good care of Ayako? And Tokiyuki's like, oh, yes, I am for sure, right? And we see that he's donating a bunch of rice and straw towards the whole cause of, hey, this big battle is going on, right? As we see that Ayako's like, hey, father, don't you mind always giving us so much rice? And he's like, hey, not at all. After all, Ayako, this rice is from your land. And she's like, my land? What are you talking about, right? As Mochizuki just explains, like, hey, sometimes a great female warrior is born to the Mochizuki clan. And when that happens, we name her Hime Yashia, right? And pretty much just says, like, hey, and we bestow extra honors upon her. And Ayako's like, Himeyasha, like, what do you mean by all of this? Gimba has a little bit of a laugh because, of course, Hime means princess, and he's like, hey, you don't act very princess-like, right? And we see that she pretty much just, like, goes through and just smashes his head on the ground. I thought it was a little funny, right? But Mochizuki just says, like, hey, you don't have to use this name all the time, but it'll sound impressive on the battlefield, right? A little bit of a cool note there, all things considered. Mima pretty much explains to Tokiyuki, like, hey, I'll stay around here and see to the house, take care, and just says to Ayako and Shizuku, don't enjoy him too much without me. And it's like, okay, then sort of is what it is. We then see that Uesui and all of his, like, zombie army comes through and just says, like, hey, we're going to go work together, and we're going to take out the Kono brothers and also Tadatoshi and do all of this various stuff, right? It's honestly a very confusing part bringing all of these various characters together. I really like how Tokiyuki just sort of interacts with all of these zombie guys throughout the rest of the chapter. It's a little funny. Eventually, Nakasaki Shuraga's Shiro ends up coming here to sort of help out Tokiyuki here at the end of the day. And also, we see that Miura also appears, which is, hey, pretty cool. I liked Miura in the beginning of this series. I also like him now, right? There's a lot of politics stuff that goes on. And the whole idea for the last half of this chapter is just Takeuchi just thinking like, hey, I'm going to win this battle very handily. And then it seems like he's not going to win this battle very handily against, I forget even who he is fighting, Tadayoshi, if I'm not mistaken, right? A little bit of a complex thing of the elusive samurai. Hey, all these characters are being thrown around. But also, I'm just having a little bit more happiness for the series after checking out a few episodes of the anime. Pretty cool stuff there, right? And finally, chapter number 15 that we are talking about this week is none other than Witch Watch. And this is a very simple Witch Watch comedy chapter, but it also makes sense being that the Witch Watch anime started on the same issue, the Witch Watch anime debuted on the same day that this issue came out in Japan, so it really makes sense why we have such a simple chapter, really just focusing on Morito and Nico here in the moment. Pretty much this chapter is all about like, hey, Morito, we want you to come over and help the, elementary school where Nico is being taught right now, or Nico's elementary school, to pretty much, we're doing this whole thing of like, hey, traffic safety and like how to not get run over by cars, right? We've made this mascot named Dent the Traffic Toad, pretty much, right? And we pretty much see that, like, hey, Morito, we heard you're an ogre, you've got disability to be run over by a car and hit by a car, so please, will you help us with it, right? We see this guy also knows the principal of the school. We meet the principal of the school, and it seems like he has a very big fondness for back in the day going through, and he ended up acting in all of these various mascot costumes, and he really reminisces on it on his old age, right? But we see all of a sudden that he gets a magic butterfly, or so it seems, right? We then come to a time where it seems like, hey, Dent the Traffic Toad is getting ready to come through his thing, and hey, a K-truck is running towards him, and it hits him and flies him up into the air, but hey, Morito wasn't the one in that costume. So it's this very big idea of like, hey, who's in the suit right now, right? As it's pretty much explained, like, hey, the principal ended up getting a magic butterfly and casting the animation spell on the mascot suit to where it's like, hey, Dent is his own pretty much little bit of a creation, right? As this whole chapter is really just built around this whole idea of like, hey, Dent coming to his realization of like, hey, does he really have a purpose in life? And It's honestly a very good comedy chapter, one that I really enjoyed, and the whole final joke of the chapter is Dent going through to save a bunch of these little girls from being hit by this massive truck in the end of the day, and then Nico ending up putting him out of his misery, taking the magic butterfly pretty much. It was a funny enough chapter, but like I said, I am really, really tired and don't feel like talking about it anymore. So, good chapter of Witch Watch. I definitely did enjoy it. And hey, with all of that out of the way, let's come through, copy over all of these chapters, and let's start ranking all of the manga this week. Because hey, there was honestly a lot of really good manga that we had. Honestly, I think I have to give the chapter of the week to if I could capitalize things correctly, Kagurabachi. It was just such an awesome chapter, seeing Samura descend from the sky. It was just really so cool. I honestly want to put Embers next because I just really like seeing how Itane was coming through, having to reckon with all of these things like, hey, I may not be the best sports ball player out there, but I am going to become better by forgetting everything else that Hikage made me learn before, right? I was calling her Haruka earlier, and her name is Hikage. I remembered it now, right? We will then follow that up with an Ichi, if I could spell, the witch, and I think that is a definitely very solid top 3. We will put Akane-banashi, if I could spell, she next, followed up by a Witch Watch, because I also just thought it was a very funny chapter, right? Gosh, I really can't. I need to go to bed. We've got 10 minutes till the next day rolls around. I am just so tired here in a moment, right? From the bottom, we're also going to put Hima 10 last. Like I said, I just wasn't a big fan of that chapter. Kill Blue right above it. And then, hey, for once in my life, Astro Royale. I think, honestly, for the first time this year, no, the Elusive Samurai got a few low chapters earlier. Yeah, Astro Royale is going decently high up. We'll then put Star of Beethoven, Star of Beethoven, followed up by a Sid Craft. Alright, I like all of this that we're getting through so far. So we have the Elusive Samurai, Rue Dragon, One Piece, and Blue Box left, it seemed. No. Do we? Oh, no, I did this wrong. I was supposed to put it down in one more column. So let's come down. There we go. Let's not delete that. Okay, there we go. So Blue Box, Omega X Koshi, One Piece, Ruri, Dragon, Elusive Samurai. We will put Ruri Dragon next. No, it's gotta be Blue Box. Blue Box. One Piece, followed up. Then we have Omega X Koshi and Elusive Samurai. Yeah, we'll put E. No, I did like Old Mexican Koshi. Ulti, X-Ro, T, Yoshi. Following that up with, what's the last one? The Elusive Samurai. I don't feel like typing that word, so I'm going to copy it over. And yeah, they're all the rankings this week. But then who is the character of the week? Honestly, I've got to give it to Samura. Samura had such a crazy moment this weekend. Also, I feel really bad that I did not have a chance to give it to Samura during all of the various, like, his entire flashback we had for 4 chapters, but I think so far, Samura deserves it at some point. So Samura from Kagurabachi. So yeah, thank you guys for watching this video on Weekly Shonen Jump, issue number 19 of 2025. I'll be back to see you guys next time for Weekly Shonen Jump, issue number 20 of 2025 next time. Hey, that's a fun little number. It rhymes and all that stuff, right? But hey, if you did enjoy this series, I've got plenty of our Weekly Shonen Jump videos on the channel. There'll not only be a playlist link down in the description of the box of this video, but also on the end card of this video. And hey, I never say this, but if you enjoyed this video, made it this far, maybe consider subscribing to the Glowplasma channel. It really helps me out, and I don't know, I'm just so tired, I'm not giving care to the wind about what I say anymore. And with that, I'm going to end the video now because I am tired and I've been recording for so long. I'll see you guys next time for next issue, Weekly Shonen Jump. I'll see you guys then. This will be Glowplasma 231, signing out.